let's talk analog hobbies. Hi, I'm Olivia. This is AV Club, where I talk horror, litfic, weird books, whatever I want to talk about. And today I want to talk about all kinds of reading recs to inspire analog hobbies. At the end of this video, I will also talk about a book that I don't yet have a recommendation for and how I would go about getting a recommendation for myself for a new analog hobby. First of all, thank you so much for such a beautiful response to my previous video about my own reading goals to combat the brain rot that has been festering up there throughout the holiday season and to retrain my attention this year. There was such beautiful discussion in the comment section. I just absolutely loved it. And I was thinking, what goes more hand in hand with combating brain rot than to really lean into analog hobbies? If you're unfamiliar with the term analog hobbies, it really is just about trying to decrease your screen time and getting to do more things with your hands, with your eyeballs that are away from screens. Also, a way to retrain your attention, to re involve yourself with the real world, the real material world, and to build real community away from online spaces, which are not always the best for our brains. On that topic, I'm currently reading a book called Scorched Earth, which really talks to the idea of that we look to online communities to give us companionship, to create connections, to be politically involved, and the way that it does not always deliver on those promises. So check that out if you are also feeling that same feeling. And so my recs for you today are a mix of fiction and nonfiction. They're not all instructional how-to kind of things, just things that will maybe inspire you. And I feel like there are a lot of underrated books in this mix. So first of all, I know one of your analog hobbies. You like reading. That's why you're here. And so one of the books that I have to recommend to you is what we talk about when we talk about books, The History and Future of Reading by Leah Price. This one is very interesting, talking about the history of reading and talking about that there was really no golden age of reading the way that people want to over intellectualize reading sometimes and take it away from being a hobby. And it's kind of optimistic, talking about the ways that we have reinvented reading over the years, and that looking back, it wasn't that people were reading all of these classic literature books that you think of as like historical books, that is not what the mass of people were reading. There was always fun genre reads, really trashy stuff, skim reading. Like all of those problems have always existed since the invention of written language. And so it kind of demystifies that process of reading. And I think will help you see whatever kind of reader you are is a valid reader, that there's always been a spectrum of readers throughout history, and anyone saying otherwise is being anti-historical. I also really enjoyed Nabokov's Favorite Word is Mauve, what the numbers reveal about the classic bestsellers in our own writing. This one is so fun if you are a data girly. I know that I seem to talk down on the idea of data in my previous video, in terms of that I want to get away from tracking everything I do to increase the amount of untrackable reading that I'm doing. But it's not so much really the idea of data. Like, I think that there's really interesting things that can come from analysis. However, it's really how my friend Lauren at Happy Haunts Library referred to it as self-surveillance, that we reinvent capitalism and efficiency and work within ourselves and within our hobbies. And that's really what I want to stay away from, and like how money is made off of all of this tracking, that this data is used whenever you put it into apps, all of that. But this data is way more fun. It's talking about things like Stephen King said, use adverbs sparingly, but if we actually look at his books, does he use adverbs at a lower rate than other writers? And this book is from 2017, so it is pre LLM, like AI stuff as we know it. So there's interesting things to do with algorithms that were a little bit more exciting back then. Things like that, you can actually algorithmically figure out who the writer of a passage is just by comparing it to their other works. And one thing that I thought was also really interesting in this book was it was talking about writers of Harry Potter fanfic. We do not support Harry Potter in this household, but for this point, that they would use British signifiers at a way higher rate than existed in the actual text, or that British writers would use words like blimey, mate, those kinds of things. Words that exist but exist sparingly. Fan fiction writers from the United States would use way, way more. So there's like really interesting data like that, just things that I would have never thought of. So if you are looking to just lean more into your analog hobby of reading this year, then maybe some books that are about books might appeal to you. If you are looking to lean more into physical media, especially for music, collecting CDs, collecting cassettes, collecting records, then I have to recommend Deep Cuts by Holly Brickley. This was in my best books of 2025. And I just think that if you are a music lover and collector, that you will really like this novel. It is so much about the analog hobby of music. It does get into the internet as well, that she's writing blogs. She is a writer. They're using the internet to find new music, but it does talk about like the actual tactile experience of CDs and records, etc. I just think that this would be a great companion to your vinyl spinning. And for the part that's not analog, that is digital, this is set in the early 2000s, so the internet was not as rancid and disgusting as it is today. And there's a really compelling love story at the center of this. It's just a really fun book for music lovers or people who have a soft spot in their heart. But if you don't have a soft spot in your heart, if you love music and you love playing music and you are more of a tortured artist kind of musician, then I need to recommend The Skin Above My Knee by Marsha Butler. This is a fantastic memoir, so underrated. She is a professional oboist in New York City, and she had a very hard early life, abuse in her family, etc. She's having a hard time in her adult years as well. She is putting everything into being this professional oboist, and really all of her pain is put into this one singular idea. This one's set in the 1970s in New York City, and it's really all about like, can her passion for playing music save her from self-destruction, because she just keeps falling into the wrong relationships, wrong drugs. Like, it is crazy. Maybe not what you think of whenever you think of the oboe, but wow, this is such a good memoir. But maybe you want to culture a new weird art obsession this year in an analog hobby. And for that, I would love to try Dorodongo, the Japanese art of making mud balls. And this is a book written by Bruce Gardner. This is so, so interesting. This is just one that I stumbled upon at the library, and I learned so much. I knew nothing about this art of making mud balls, but it is so particular. It's so tactile. In this book, there is a how to on how to do this yourself, and he gives a lot of tips on how to get it to look certain ways. You have to be so particular in how you are putting this mud together, the process of it, the time that it takes. It is definitely a long time hobby, and that at the end of it, you do get this incredible art piece, this perfectly round, shiny, beautiful mud ball. And there's also just like some life philosophy behind it too, behind the why of using mud and coming to appreciate dirt and mud. I think was really valuable to me whenever reading this. And it was just talking about how the dirt from one place, even within the same city, is just not going to look the same, that there's different amounts of clay or different minerals in the mud, even in different areas of a city, and that they're so location bound. And just like growing to appreciate things that we usually pay no mind to. I really enjoyed this book. I need someone to get into Dorodongo this year. Maybe it could be me. You never know. So this book does have a complete how-to, but I think it's fascinating even just to experience someone else's incredible passion for a very specific niche art form. One of my favorite analog hobbies is cooking, and obviously there are so many beautiful cookbooks in the world, so it's not about like what specific book to read, except for my favorite cookbook author. The one that I could recommend to everyone just to at least peruse through is Bryant Terry's cookbooks. A genius to me. This one, Afro Vegan, is about African Caribbean Southern influences on recipes. But what makes these so different is He always has both a history and personal experience with the ingredients or with the recipes above each recipe, but I also love that he has a soundtrack for all of his cookbooks, that he recommends a song to go with every single recipe. And I just think that's incredible. I love this one. My very favorite one's called Vegetable Kingdom, but it was at the bottom of my pile. And yeah, I didn't get it out today. But my cookbooks are so precious to me. Like, you don't understand how many books I culled when moving to Australia, but I moved all of my cookbooks, even though they were the heaviest and therefore the most expensive things to ship. They're so, so special to me. I love writing in my cookbooks too. I'll write the date and event if applicable of whenever I cooked a certain recipe. I don't see a lot of other people writing in their cookbooks, and I will do things like, oh, I wish I had added more or less salt. I added spice to this, whatever. Like, I will do those things that are actually about the recipe, but I'll also just like write an emotional scene of it. Like, it's like a little bit of journaling. Like, wow, there was a really big thunderstorm whenever I cooked this for the first time, or I had this wine with this meal. Just like other things that make it feel more yours. Highly recommend. On a similar theme, if you are looking to get into mixology, I have to recommend the Beach Bum Berries Potions of the Caribbean. I love a tiki drink. I love a tiki bar. There's great ones in New Orleans, there's okay ones other places that I've been, but I just love it. And this, what makes this different than a normal cocktail book is that it's really a nonfiction book. Like, it has so much history about the history of tiki and the history of all of these specific drinks, on top of having recipes for so many of them. Like, beautiful historical documents, as well as, making a giant shareable tiki bowl beverage. I really enjoy this book, and I'll just like read a little bit every now and then. But I think that if you're looking to make something like drinking more meaningful to you, more mindful, I think learning the history of a cocktail and treating it like more of a ritual or more of an experience might be something to help bridge the gap. If you're like, I don't want to go dry all the way, but I want to be more mindful about my drinking, something like that might be something to consider. While we're on the topic of drinking, I did love the memoir You Had Me at Pet Nat, a natural wine soaked memoir by Rachel Signer. This is gorgeous to me. I listened to the audiobook of it on a drive. I think I was going to Austin. I was going to somewhere in Texas, and I just listened to it the whole way. I love natural wine. I never really cared for wine before getting into natural wine, and just really learning about like the deep sensual experience that it can be. But this memoir is so wonderful. You Had Me at Pet Nat, this memoir, you probably want to have some interest in wine, I guess, but it is so much about just following your passions. At the beginning of this memoir, Rachel was working in New York City, kind of dead end, was not enjoying herself, and on kind of a whim decided to go to France and learn about wine. And there she met a man on this wine trip that she fell absolutely in love with, and he was Australian. So there was this like really long period where it maybe didn't seem like a doable relationship. So there's a lot to discover in here about like, what would you do to make a passion work? What would you do to make a relationship work? Spoiler alert, she did move to Australia and working in the natural wine scene here, but I just really loved this memoir. Like, it is so romantic to me in multiple ways that just spoke to my soul, spoke to my very sensitive soul. And one last food related one, Bread, Wine, Chocolate, The Slow Loss of Foods We Love by Simran Sethi. This is also one if you are into cooking but looking to make it more of a mindful experience. This one is about very specific instances of making coffee, like how coffee is grown, how chocolate is grown, what are the real processes behind that, what are the environmental tolls of that, what are the risk behind it. It's also talking about monoculture in agriculture, talking about how 95% of the calories consumed worldwide can be tracked down to just 30 species of plants and what that means for the environment. But this is just a great work of journalism. Like, she is going to all these places and learning very specifically about all of these different things about how we get our wine, how we get bread. Do we see collapses in these things coming down the road? So it is very much about a love of food, a love of coffee, a love of wine, but thinking about the actual realities of that situation. So there's a little bit of something for everyone here for food and drink, I think. And another one for the artist. I think if you're someone who has passions, who is an artist, who is thinking, do I make this thing just be my hobby or do I have to monetize it in some way? Maybe something like Sweet for Barbara Loden by Natalie Leger. This one was so interesting. It is about Barbara Loden, and the only movie that she ever directed was the highly acclaimed Wanda. And it's all these anecdotes about how this one movie impacted so many artists, so many writers, etc., and that she just didn't ever make another movie, that she could just make this one piece of art, and it wasn't this thing that defined her life every single day after she made the movie that, okay, you have to make and monetize the next thing. It was okay to make this one piece of art that impacted so many people, and it's just a monograph on that one film. So, yeah, there's definitely not one right way to be an artist. And one that I find inspiring is Magic and Medieval Manuscripts by Sophie Page. I love the art of medieval manuscripts. There's just so much interesting art in here that could inspire you. I love the use of color, I love the use of shape, I love the blocking of each piece. But I think also it just speaks to that it is human nature to create. We are a very creative species. This is from a time when monks were some of the only literate people, and sometimes they just wanted to draw silly cats on the side, make little jokes and riddles on the side. And I think that goes back to what I was talking about earlier as far as reading, that there's never been this one right way to be a reader, a golden age of reading, etc. Like, it's okay to be very smart and be writing these things and be critical, but also just to have a little bit of fun, to draw a silly little guy. But I also think it just speaks to a desire to make things beautiful, that they were very sought after tradespeople too, very skilled to make these beautiful manuscripts. And I feel like we're living in a world that is increasingly declining into something that doesn't value art, that doesn't value creativity. And it is nice to just like look at these instances that it is something that is like inherent to us as a species, that we do create, and art is so valuable. Okay, stick with me here because I know this is supposed to be about analog hobbies, but I feel like what people want out of analog hobbies a lot of time is to just stop doom scrolling, to be mindful, to be meditative. And so I don't think there's one right way to do hobbies. And I don't think that because you sometimes have hobbies that are in some ways digital, that you can't still be a mindful, creative person. So if you, like me, love video games, but are thinking, is there something more? There doesn't have to be something more. You can do it just for fun. But if you are thinking, is there something more? Then I have to recommend some critical writing on video games. I have loved both Critical Hits Writers Playing Video Games, which is an anthology with some like really heavy hitter authors and edited by Carmen Maria Machado and J. Robert Lennon. So this was just like so many bangers. There was like even like a comic in here. This was an arc that I received. Thank you so much for them. I actually got this as an arc because I covered it on my podcast at the time it came out in 2023. Personal essays on this or critical writing, but mostly like about the emotional response to playing video games. So that might be it. But if you want something that's looking at things more critically, Story Mode by Trevor Strunk, Video Games and the Interplay Between Consoles and Culture, this is actually written by the co-host of the podcast, No Cartridge, that I, co-host. So I am friends with Trevor, but this is really like such a good piece of writing if you're looking to read critically about video games. Different essays in here on survival horror, first-person shooters, the Souls series, so like Dark Souls, Metal Gear Solid, Fallout, Final Fantasy, so much more about the legitimacy of video games as a thing to be studied and talked about critically. which obviously I believe. So, and one last thing, what I would do if I wanted to find a book on analog hobbies. Well, I did. I want to get more into gardening this year, especially taking care of houseplants. So what I did was I went on to my Libby app, just put in houseplants in my search thing, and then you can like look through all the books, just scroll through. There will be a lot, and I'm just tagging stuff for now, not putting a time limit on checking it out right now, but whenever it gets to it, it'll be there for me. And yeah, so that's what I did for looking into gardening this year. But another thing that I would do, especially if you're an artist or if you're looking to be creative, is to go to your local library and just look through the art section, not with anything in mind. It's not like, oh, I want to crochet, so I'm going to get a book on crocheting, which you can do. But I would also recommend picking stuff on art forms you've never heard of. That's how I found Dora Dongo, and that was so inspiring to me. I think you can learn a lot by learning about the creative processes of people that you don't have anything in common with. That's not even necessarily an art form that you are personally invested in creating, but just learning about how other people's minds are working creatively, learning to value new medium, that maybe by learning about the value of dirt in this book, you will bring something from that into your crochet that's going to make your crochet different than anyone else's. And it will be imbued with all of your personal essence. I mean, always the library is just a great place to look because you will find people who are experts on things that you have never heard of. And that is a beautiful treat, honestly. I am so grateful to live in a beautiful world with people with all different kinds of experiences and all different kinds of hobbies and creativities, and we are all better together. So I wish you all the best in your analog hobbies, cozy hobbies this year. And hopefully, some of these books are interesting to you, or you can at least get some kind of thought process of how you might find books that appeal to you from this. But until next time, I'll talk to you later. Bye.